Russia accused
I
West
can
of double
only note
stand
that
Gaza
the invitation
ceasefire.
was sent by the hosts of the summit. This is the leadership of Egypt, which, as reported, coordinated its actions with other Arab initiators, but primarily with the United States. By the way, the Prime Minister of Iraq is not invited to the Sharm el-Sheikh summit either, although Iraq is currently the chairman of the League of Arab States. As for the Japanese ambassador participating there, well, in my opinion, US Vice President J.D. Vance has already said that Gaza needs to be rebuilt. And the main burden, as he emphasized, the United States hopes that the main burden will be borne by the Arab countries. Well, Japan is also periodically involved in rebuilding territories that have suffered as a result of military actions. Probably, there is some sense in this too. As for Russia is ready to participate in any formats. You mentioned the Quartet. The Quartet, which was destroyed by the efforts of the Biden administration, and which nevertheless ensured very serious agreements, including the agreements of 2005. No. Earlier, in 2001, when the Quartet's roadmap was approved in the UN Security Council, which spelled out in detail all the steps necessary for the creation of a Palestinian state. The process was supposed to be completed within 1 year. The Quartet introduced this resolution. The Security Council approved it unanimously. What happened next is known to us. And several more similar initiatives met the same fate. I won't even mention the Madrid Principles of 1991, the Arab Peace Initiative of 2002, which were welcomed by all and led nowhere. Therefore, when you ask, music, regarding the prospects of today's event and the prospects of all these efforts in general, which we actively welcome, the President said this the other day, speaking at a press conference in Dushanbe. Of course, skepticism, as you put it, remains. Too many times these hopes for peace, for the prosperity of this region of the world have not come true. Moreover, as I already mentioned in my opening remarks, we hear such skeptical forecasts from different sides. I just read that Benjamin Netanyahu said that far from everything is over. Israel still has many enemies, they all need to be finished off. So this can be called skepticism or aimed at continuing offensives against those whom Israel considers enemies. Hamas. There were also discussions there about how these agreements would be implemented. Who should take the first step? But thank God, some hostages have already been released. Now it's Israel's turn. The IDF seems to have withdrawn to the agreed line. And we very much hope that everything that was agreed upon will be fulfilled. If the direct participants of this summit and those who will deal with this issue, the implementation of Trump's plan after this summit, consider that Russia can be useful, I assure you, we will not refuse. But imposing our services is not in our tradition. That's why we wish this summit success, first of all, so that the Palestinian people can breathe freely.
Yusem Temami, representative of the Iraqi channel Al Ikhbariya, the official TV channel of Iraq. How do you assess Russia's role in ending the bloodshed in Gaza? Especially considering that Russia opposed and denied the horrific events that took place in Gaza and tried to put an end to them. How did Russia influence Hamas?
We have tried to influence everyone in one direction, in the direction of rejecting violence, developing agreements on coexistence. This is inevitable. Compromises in any conflict. Agreements to stop the bloodshed. This is a compromise. Every country must make concessions. They have proven this. And I very much hope that the other side, our Israeli colleagues, with whom we are also in constant contact, will understand the need to seek precisely a balance of interests, rather than setting goals that would mean eliminating any threats to your existence, regardless of what your neighbors think and what arguments they have. Therefore, a complicated situation, but I mentioned again that the root of the problem is still the lack of progress in creating a Palestinian state and even more so, the presence of growing regression in creating a Palestinian state. I remember when I worked there, it was, perhaps, 25 years ago, I spoke with Israeli colleagues and quite informally tried to simply understand how it is possible, how to find a way out of this situation. And I kept telling them in a friendly, human way that the main risk for the region, for Israel's security, including the security of other countries in the region, is the unresolved issue of implementing UN decisions on creating a Palestinian state, for almost 80 years now. At that time, my Israeli interlocutors said that this is an exaggerated position, an overstatement. And if you think that way, it would mean encouraging terrorists. But precisely the unresolved issue of the Palestinian state is the most significant factor fueling the preservation and strengthening of extremism in the Arab world. Of course, yes. Remember the outrageous terrorist attack on October 7th, which we immediately condemned in 2023, and after that several times, when Israel began its operation under the slogan of destroying everyone. I remember their Minister of Defense and some other members of the cabinet from such radical figures said, in response to calls to do everything to spare civilians in Gaza, there are no civilians there, everyone is an extremist, starting from the age of 3. I remember this very well. But then we submitted resolutions to the Security Council 5 times. The United States vetoed these resolutions under Biden, but the collective punishment of Palestinians continued. And if we are talking about extremism, imagine that not a single generation, no generation in that same Gaza sector lives under blockade, occupation, blockade of normal channels of communication with the outside world. And how do you think parents raise their children in Gaza? Have they been raising them all these decades? What did they tell them when a child asks, "Mom, what was here before? Who is my grandfather, grandmother? How do you live? Who is in charge here?" And so, these children, and in school, of course, they will receive corresponding knowledge there too. And someone wants these children to grow up in a state of immense happiness for the fate that was prepared for them. Therefore, there is no escaping without a Palestinian state. The issue must be resolved. How to do it? That's another question. But mutual concessions cannot be avoided here, because if, Trump's plan mentions Gaza in the context of forming Palestinian statehood, while the West Bank is not mentioned at all. And if you look at the map of the West Bank, then beyond the illegal settlements, practically nothing is left. I even heard somewhere that someone says, we need to make 2 or 3 municipalities there for the Palestinians. This is not a state. And I don't think that creating municipalities or some quasi-state structures will be considered in the Arab world, and first of all by the Palestinians, as a satisfactory outcome of this nearly 80-year drama. Here compromises will have to be made. I have no doubts about that. Of course, the West dragged its feet on this issue, did not want to use its levers to accelerate the creation of a Palestinian state. Otherwise, the quartet's roadmap I mentioned, 25 years old, would have been implemented, and we would already have a solution to the problem. I already mentioned in June, when there was another escalation in the Gaza sector, a humanitarian catastrophe without involvement. And then President Macron, then Prime Minister Starmer, someone else in the Netherlands, I think, started saying, that's it, we will go to the UN and at the General Assembly recognize the Palestinian state. This was in June, and the General Assembly started in 3 months. But if you decided that the state needs to be recognized, why wait 3 months? Or did you hope that by then there would be nothing left to recognize? That's why everyone here must abandon double standards. And, I read today one political scientist who says that the West does not need an independent Palestine. The West needs a mandated Palestine again. One would like to believe it, but by some signs, the actions of a number of our Western colleagues, including the British, they are generally heading in that direction. Therefore, the summit, I am concluding my answer to this very important question. The summit that starts today in Sharm el-Sheikh, and it is already being convened on the basis of a compromise platform. The initiators have already proposed a compromise, and now we need not to tempt fate, but to clearly fulfill everything that was proposed, which will allow stopping the bloodshed, solving humanitarian problems, and